As we inch closer to 2024, now is the perfect time to make a divorce prep checklist. And our next guest is about to explain why you need to start doing that before the clock strikes midnight on New Year's Eve, and what needs to be on that notepad so you don't look anything when it comes to the financial portion of a divorce. Joining us to explain is Donna LaScala, president of Comprehensive Divorce Solutions. Donna is a certified divorce financial analyst, a registered financial consultant, a financial neutral, board member of the Association of Financial Planners, and current president of the Long Island chapter of the Financial Planning Association. Donna, welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Always a pleasure to have you. And as we've been saying throughout this broadcast, it is the holidays. And while some people may not want to be thinking or dealing with the financial information that comes with going through a divorce, you say now is the perfect time to really focus and pay attention to this. Why?
So logically speaking, one of the things that happens at the end of the year is that statements are generated by all of the investments that you have for the year end. And those statements are usually pretty comprehensive and give you a good snapshot of what has occurred in the fiscal year. So a statement of your 401k, your 403b, any other kind of retirement plan, a mortgage statement, a bank statement, all of those things generated at the end of this month will come either, within a couple of days of the new year. And that's really a good place to start when you're compiling information for your divorce, because it's very important to have that year-end statement as a starting point.
But how far back should people go when gathering their records?
So as a CDFA, one of the first things I ask for is the most current statement. And as I said, a year-end statement is really the perfect place to start. The reason why I ask for that statement is so that I can get a good picture of what all the assets are, what the liabilities are, the expenses, and so forth. Then I might ask for either 3 years' worth of tax returns. And the reason why that's important is because it shows a pattern of behavior. So we don't want to just look at 1 year. We may want to look at 3 years. And it, again, depends on the particular situation, what things we need 3 years' worth for. The other thing that you want to do is establish what is marital versus non-marital. And that really comes into play with a lot of retirement accounts, because it's likely that people may have been working at a particular job or have rolled over money from a previous employer that was before the marriage. And it's very important to know the date of marriage and the value of assets like a 401k, 403b, IRA, because you then can establish with the last statement what happened in between. What we look at is what's known as the cutoff date as the ending point, and we look at the marriage date and a statement as close to the date of marriage as possible as the beginning point. And then everything that happened in between is considered marital property. Whatever happened before and whatever happens after is non-marital property. And that's very important when you're looking at things like retirement assets.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you touched upon retirement assets because, a lot of times when we talk about divorce, the biggest increase we're seeing in terms of demographics is what's called the gray divorce. And one thing that that these people are really interested in paying attention to and are concerned about are pension retirement plans. So what are the biggest issues when it comes to dealing with pension and retirement plans in a divorce?
So again, the biggest issue is what's premarital, what's marital, and what is actually in the marital estate. What is divisible, what is separate, and those are very crucial things. So, for example, when you're talking about a pension and you're talking about either a firefighter or a law enforcement officer or a teacher, someone who has a history of work that may have begun prior to the marriage, it's important to know when that date was and how many years of service were accumulated prior to marriage. So let's just take a police officer, for example. Most of them start their careers in their early 20s. They may not have actually gotten married for 5 or so years later. So that puts them maybe into their early 30s, late 20s, early 30s. So all of those years prior, when they have been accumulating a pension or other retirement assets, is outside of the marital estate. And there's a term that's used for looking at that is a mathematical calculation based on years of service, years of marriage, years to retirement, and it's called the coverture fraction. Now, the reason why that is important is because you have to determine what percentage of what is determined to be marital the non-employee spouse is entitled to. So that is a very important calculation that is used when you're looking at a pension in particular. And so the aggregate number is not exactly what people think it is, because first you have to determine what's premarital, then you have to determine what's marital, then you look at the coverture fraction to determine what portion of what's marital is actually going to be paid to the alternate payee, the non-employee spouse. But not having any documentation of any of that really works against both parties, because you can't just depend on somebody's memory. Well, I think I kind of started at this point, and then we got married at that point. No, we need specific information. We need documentation. We need statements. We need calculations that are given by the pension department of whatever organization you're involved in, because that gives us the guideline, the guideposts, and it becomes more reasonable and fair to both parties, because we can't just go on, I think it's how I remember it to be. We need specific information. So again, going back to that gathering and organizing of financial documents, that's the first thing on my 8 key steps. Gather and organize all financial documents, create a comprehensive list of assets and liabilities. That's step number 1.
And another thing you do is you walk people through what's called 4 distinct time frames: immediate, short-term, intermediate, and long. Explain to us why this is so important and why people really need to understand what this is.
Well, because one of the things that we talk about on that checklist is trying to define your financial goals for after the divorce is final. And the thing that becomes a stumbling block for a lot of people is because they're afraid to make a decision, not really knowing what they're looking at in the future. So I try to focus them on those 4 time frames. Immediate, what's right in front of you, what's going to happen immediately when you sign those divorce papers. Then you look at short term. That could be 1 to 3 years. So what's going to happen next? And how do you plan for that? Because especially if you have children and you're getting divorced, things change considerably as your children get older, not only with the income you may be receiving from spousal support or child support, but also your responsibilities for education. With an older child, you're looking at college. Then you want to look at intermediate term. So that can be around 5 years, 3 to 5 years. So what's going to happen? How old are your children? How old are you? Are you close to retirement? What's going to happen when you retire, maybe in 5 years from now? Are you going to start claiming Social Security at full retirement age, or can you wait? Are you rolling over a 401k and now you're going to start to try to generate an income from it? Are you going to be in payout status of your pension? So when does that fall? In the immediate, in the short term, in the intermediate, or is it long term? Is it 5 years out or more? Are you going to be selling the house? Where are you going to retire? What is going to change at all of these stages? And how do we plan appropriately for each point in time that occurs and leave enough flexibility so that if what if happens, we understand how to move and adjust and adapt to that change. And that really helps people start to see, okay, I need to worry about what's in front of me right now. And then I can look at maybe the next year to two, because a lot of people are afraid to make a decision and think they're going to have to live with that decision forever. And it stops them from being able to think logically because it's an emotional point of view. So when I look at the logic of it, what are the moving parts? What happens at each stage and phase? What changes? What remains the same? What's going to happen after that? It gives them a better roadmap to travel down so that they understand all of the different things that will and can occur.
As a certified divorce financial analyst, do you suggest people create a what if fund? And I'm so glad you touched upon that, because I did that when I was going through my own divorce. And then came the question of how much do you put in there given, the circumstances?
So yes, if you can and have the ability to kind of put away, it used to be called a rainy day fund, a what if fund, a cushion. But some people don't have the luxury of doing that. So in addition to recommending that they do that, we talk about the reality of their own situation. And then I say, okay, let's really review and update your budget. And that's step 2 on my list. You really have to look at what you're spending, what income you're receiving from either your own job, or if you're going to be receiving spousal or child support or having to pay spousal or child support. Let's review and update your budget, assess your income and your expenses, and decide what things need to be changed in order to make sure that you do have a what-if fund, because things will happen, and you don't want to be caught by surprise.
Last question, because we're running out of time. One thing people don't want to be caught by surprise by is seeing their former spouse get all this money that they did not want them getting a hold of, which is why changing your beneficiary should also be important. Why is that? I guess my question is, how do you encourage somebody to put that high on their list so they don't overlook it?
So as we've talked about before, the title of accounts is very important. Whose name is it in, and what happens to it if something happens to either one of you? The assumption of marriage is joint tenants with rights of survivorship. But once you are unmarried, if you decide to own something together, that automatically changes to joint tenancy in common, which is very, very different. Because say you and I owned something together. If something happened to me and we were tenants in common, my portion goes to somebody else who I've named as a beneficiary, and that could be a new spouse. So you have to be very, very careful that the intention of your divorce follows the paperwork for insurance policies, retirement plans, a house. Anything that has been owned or will continue to be owned needs to be adjusted to reflect the intention of your divorce.
Donna, for people who want to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
Easiest way is to call me at 516-234-7522.
Donna LaScala, President of Comprehensive Divorce Solutions, thank you so much for joining us. We will be right back.
At Comprehensive Divorce Solutions, Donna LaScala provides the tools for people to deal with assets, debts, equitable distribution, and retirement in divorce negotiations. We hold your hand during and after the divorce process, providing a roadmap of what happens next and into the future. Divorce is difficult whether you're initiating it or not. It's fraught with emotion. When you deal with emotions, you are not dealing with logic, making it more difficult to decide what to do with your money. Hiring a professional to assist you in walking down the money path is crucial to avoiding potentially costly mistakes. Donna's goal is to make sure that each individual knows how they are going to be able to survive and thrive during and after divorce. As a CDFA-trained mediator and collaborative financial neutral, Donna helps people get unstuck and move forward towards their post-divorce future. Call Donna LaScala at 516-218-6919, 516-218-6919.